Okay, in this help video, we're going to talk through reading from the Hazard Scout API. Now, there are ways to write to the Hazard Scout site programmatically, but those would be listed in the API writing video. So check that one out if you're looking for writing to the site. So I'm going to start out by going to our demo site, and we're actually going to walk through actually setting up a token and actually reading programmatically. So to start out with, to be able to access the API page, you would need to make sure you had permission within the control panel to actually manage the API. And so I'm set up as an administrator, so I have access to that page. Once I have access, I can click on the API page within the control panel, and I see a link to view the docs, and I can also create API tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a token right now. So I've created that. I can choose whether I want it to be writable or not, but I don't. I just want it read only right now, so we'll leave it like that. And then I'll kind of note it with something to list how it's being used. So we'll say that the Acme IT team is using this token, so we can kind of keep track of what the purpose is there. So that's our token. So now I'm going to go to the docs and kind of look through what are the different endpoints that this API offers. So they're all listed on the left over here, and there are maybe 30 or so different types of data that you can pull in through the API. So for example, I could go in and I could ping the API just to make sure it's up. So to do that, you can see, the parameters. You need to have your token, and then there's an optional pretty print parameter that would format the JSON in a nicer way. But basically what you would do with this API is you make an HTTPS request, and then it will give you a JSON response. And then that JSON response is always going to be an object, and it's going to have OK equals true if it worked, and if it failed, it's going to be OK false. And then it's going to give you an error and a description field as well. And so if you get anything that's not a valid JSON object, it means the request didn't even make it to the server in the first place. So let's go ahead and try one of these out. I'm going to use this curl example that we've got, and I'm going to open up our terminal, and I'm going to paste that in there. And then we've got to drop in our actual token. So I'm going to go back to the control panel in the API page. I'm going to copy our token, and then now I'm going to paste it in. And then now whenever I run that, you can see we've got OK equals true as the response right there. So it worked, our token worked, and we were able to hit the API. So let's try something a little bit more complicated. So say that you're looking through the API and you want to get a list of your equipment and you want to know what the statuses are for those. Maybe you want to put them in your own personal database or dashboard or something like that. Well, you could do that by scrolling to the equipments endpoint, equipments.list, and then the parameters that you have here are you can filter by equipment ID, in service or out of service, and those are the parameters we've got right here. So and then we have some code examples to actually show you how to make those requests. So if you were using Node, then there would be one. If you're using C#, Java, it gives you at least an idea of how you would make that request and kind of format everything. So we're going to actually do an example here with Node. And I'm going to copy this request in here. And we're going to actually create a little file. So I'll do touch run.js to create the file. And then we will open that and paste in our sample code. I'm going to need to actually have an npm package here. And then we're going to install the request module. And we'll save it. And then I'm going to install Lodash as well. That's not required, but it's going to help us here to kind of look at our data. So now we have request and Lodash as some libraries that are available to our Node script. And then you can see from our code sample, we've already got the URL in here. We've got everything except we need the token and then we need to choose an equipment type that we want to actually filter on. So we'll go ahead and paste in our token, and then now we'll do equipment type underscore ID, I think is what it was. And then we will go to our equipment page, and there's a few different ways that you could find that ID, but I'm just going to edit. Let's say we want lanyards here. So I'm going to copy that. You couldn't see it, but I copied the ID out of the URL there, and now I'm going to paste it in here. So now we've got a full request ready to go. And then we're going to get the response object right here, and we could just go ahead and log it just to see something. We'll just log the full response, and then we'll exit. So now I will run that script, and there it is. I can see the JSON for this object that was in the response, and I can see I've got all the equipment, and within each of these equipments I can see that there's a status and there's a serial number. So maybe we would, and this is getting more into just coding, but just to show you how you can kind of pull this data out, we could say for each of these response.equipments, there we go. We're going to log the equipment serial number. All right. And then, so now there it is. We've got all the serial numbers for our lanyards right there. And then we could also log the status as well, because that's another field that we get back from the API. So we'll save the status, and then we'll run that, and then now we can see all of the lanyards are up to date. So that gives you an idea of kind of how to pull the data in there. Now, technically, you would want to make sure that you had a valid response from the server. So you could say, if there's not a response, or if the response.OK is not strictly equal to true, then maybe you'd do a callback, or we could just throw something. Invalid response. But we've got a valid response here, so that's not going to matter. So that is what it looks like to pull data from the API. There are a number of API methods here and a number of ways to filter it. If you do run into an error, the errors are all listed here within the documentation of what types of error you could get for this error field, and then what is actually happening to cause that. So if you have an invalid token, or if you're missing a parameter, or if something was not found, those would be all different kinds of errors, but you're still going to get a 200 status code. You're still going to get a JSON object, and it's going to have a property of OK and set to false if there's an error. So hopefully that kind of gets you started on the API. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions. There's also a way to try this API through the demo side of the real site right here, where you can actually just drop in your values and run the request, and you'll actually see the HTTP response right there.